Tony, good to see you. Welcome to this conversation, this live session together. Why don't you introduce yourself just so we know exactly who you are and where you're from?
My name's Tony Houlihan. I'm a property developer and investor. I've been working in property now for about 12, 13 years. Predominantly most of that has been across the northwest of England.
Nice. And company, tell us a little bit about your companies.
So, Aligned Property Services is our main company. Four different services through that company. We offer consultancy. So, we either do acquisitions, so property acquisitions, helping people find suitable investment properties, property development consultancy, which is actually helping them convert and build property. And we also offer procurement support as well, which is predominantly in facilities management and property related procurement activity.
Nice. Well, let's dig into the property development stuff. What is Aligned Team's experience in property development?
So, and we've been working in property for a long time now, and we've done lots of different types of development. Everything from small refurbs, simple buy to lets, all the way through to sort of conversions, houses of multiple occupation, commercial to residential schemes, so solicitors' offices, etc., into apartment blocks. And we've done a number of new build schemes as well.
Nice. And what's the sort of profile of those customers? Is it landlords or developers or what kind of people come to you?
Customers that want the development consultancy are investors who are stepping into development for the first time, or they are moving into a bigger project than they've taken on in the past. So we also work with landowners who don't have any development experience at all, but they have a plot of land and they have an opportunity or a property to develop.
Okay, got that. And I've got a question here, which you can probably help me understand a bit better. But who are the critical members of a development team, and do they change for different types of property development?
Yeah, of course. So, more complicated the team, the sort of development is, the members you would probably need on your development team. So investors at the beginning assume that they just need a builder, and that sometimes works out okay if you've got a competent builder and it's only a relatively small project. But as you go up the levels in terms of complexity and value, you find that you need more people on your team. You probably need more input from the beginning from people like architects, engineers. You might need more surveys doing to satisfy planning requirements, things like that. And then, as you get more complicated, you might need project management, quantity surveyors working as part of your team on a regular basis, depending on the value.
Got it. And that's where your expertise and the quality of your team becomes invaluable.
Absolutely. So, depending on the scheme, we would talk to our clients, we would assess what's needed in terms of, what is it? Is it a conversion? Is it a new build scheme? What's the value of it? Is the funding involved? All those things will define who's needed on each team. And to answer your question, it does differ from development to development. So even if you've got a very good architect for one particular scheme, they may not be appropriate for another scheme because that might not be their niche. Architects will specialize in things like house of multiple occupation, HMOs. Others would be more suited towards new build development. And, even new build, you can either be housing association new build or high-end private resi. There may be different architects that you pick depending on development.
Yeah. And is there examples where you've gone into a project and the client thought they were going to do one thing, but you've been able to help them see there was an even bigger opportunity?
So our process is we will sit down with the client at the beginning and try and evaluate, trying to get out of it. Times people will buy an opportunity as it's been presented to them. The opportunities, as you mentioned, to either additional units, if it's a multi-unit scheme, there may be ways of configuring it differently, different exits that are more suitable for that type of scheme. So Very much sitting with the client and understanding what they want out of it first, and then making sure that we've got, you know, all the bases covers in terms of risk, numbers, and ensuring that there's sometimes a backup plan if plan
Yeah.
A doesn't always break.
Yeah, plan Bs are always important. How do you know, what's a good measure of whether a development is going to work or not?
So, knowing your numbers is critical. Sounds really obvious, but it's really important to understand all the different costs involved with your development. Um, Obviously, at the minute, there are things like inflation on labour and materials, which has been quite difficult for people over the last few years to manage because costs have kept going up, going up, going up. And some of these developments are 2 to 3 years long. Difficult for an investor or a developer to manage that beginning. So, understanding where the numbers are today accurately and trying to forecast where they will go throughout the development is one thing. And then understanding where your hidden costs or your costs of things like finance and legals are all factored in appropriately at the beginning will help us do a thorough appraisal. And then there's things that you can do in terms of stress testing the exit. So, if house prices go up 10% in the next 2 years, we wouldn't factor that in at the beginning of the project because that's optimistic that that's definitely going to happen. But you should also be stress testing it the other way because property prices can go down. It can change.
Yeah, so staying on top of all those things is vital. And again, you've got the experience of doing that, where some other people, no matter how long they've been in the business, they just not have dealt with some of the things that you're used to dealing with week in, week out.
Experienced investors and developers sometimes do with a second pair of eyes on things. It's easy to get caught up when you're attached to a deal or an opportunity, that everything's going to go to plan, that the costs are going to go up, not only the time frames are going to overrun. But in reality, in property development, that happens, more times than not. Understanding how to mitigate that and what to do when it does happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get that. What advice would you give to people looking for funding for their development projects?
So funding and development is very, very important to make sure that you've got enough capital to do it. The different ways of achieving that. Some are in a fortunate position where they have their own capital and they can fund their development the whole way through. The people so they can either use private investors, joint ventures, or they can use traditional lending. So from development finance companies, bridging companies. It depends on the scheme, what's appropriate, and what the exit is as to what we talk about, and it's up to the client how they want to approach it. Each type of funding has its pros and cons.
I understand. Got that. And in terms of contractors, you know, finding the right contract. Oh, got a bit of reverb there. Sorry about that. How do you find the right contractors for a development project?
Again, we use a fairly straightforward process, depending on the scheme, depending on the location. Of investors I see typically asking WhatsApp groups, asking network meetings, asking on, checker trade and stuff like that online. There's lots of different places you can find contractors. What's important we find is doing your due diligence on those contractors properly. So we would always advise chatting to multiple contractors, in the type of scheme that you're looking at, about what their experience is in that type of scheme, how they would normally work with a client, understanding their infrastructure in terms of do they only use subcontractors? Do they have their own in-house trades? Do they have robust procedures for things like health and safety? How do they work in terms of payments? There's lots of different things that you need to assess with the contracts to make sure they're the right fit for you and the right fit for your scheme.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine that completely. Yeah. And what about the delivery of the development project? How do you manage how do you manage the delivery of a development project?
Bespoke to individual developments. We tend to focus on the northwest, so we can be at our developments within a short space of time, should we be needed. On some of the developments we've done over the last couple of years, we will appoint a main contractor. Then to be a little bit less hands-on for us in terms of we'll probably go and visit site once a week, once a month, depending on how long the project is. We'll have a communication plan with the contractor that, they send regular updates, any issues are flagged, and we get back to them in a certain amount of time if any decisions are made. The key is just making sure that the communication is constant throughout the project.
Yeah, I can imagine. And the bigger picture slightly now, what are some of the current big challenges in property development?
So, finding deals, be difficult for people. The inflationary measures that we spoke about before in terms of materials and labour, but property prices and land prices are staying fairly stubborn. So finding stuff that's got a margin in it that you can make a decent development profit on is getting more and more difficult. So again, it's really important to be able to analyze those deals properly and quickly and make sure you weed out the bad ones fairly quickly.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of development strategies, what are the most popular development strategies right now?
So if you'd have asked me probably 6 months ago, I would have said supported housing was probably the flavour of the month in terms of the majority of the investors in the Northwest. However, over the last couple of months, lots of towns and cities up here have sort of implemented Article 4, which means you can't convert into a HMO without full planning. This obviously creates another risk that you may not get planning, more complexity and time to the process. So I think more and more people are now going back to a standard flip where you buy something, you add some value to it in some way, and then you sell it. Or we're seeing quite a few people go towards commercial to residential conversions, where you're basically repurposing a commercial building and turning it into a residential scheme. So either turning it into houses or turning it into apartments.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a big factor for a lot of towns and inner city locations right now.
Yeah.
And just finally, how do you work with your development consultancy clients?
We start every conversation, find out a bit more about the client, what they do, what their personal circumstances are, what their objectives are out of a development. Um, don't have a one size fits all approach. We don't have, checklists and cookie cutters. We want to really understand the client and what they need from it and what they need from us. As I said, some people are more or less experienced. In some instances, we will literally just go through a scheme with a client and check viability. So we'll go through their appraisal, we'll ask some questions. Sometimes we've just done a paperwork review where a developer thinks they're ready to start something, check that they've got all the right surveys in place, they know what they're doing in terms of the compliance and the building regs. We will literally handhold an investor or a developer all the way through the process. So we will help them acquire the property, we'll help them oversee the development of any changes that need doing, and all the way through to exit, whether that's selling it on the open market, handing it over to a provider, if it's supported housing. So again, we have lots of different options, and it is all bespoke to the client.
Brilliant. That sounds like a very comprehensive approach. And if someone's listening to this and feels like you might be a good fit for them, how should people get in contact with you?
So to get in contact with us, just drop us an email, set up an initial chat. My email address is tony@alignproperty.co.uk.
That's brilliant, Tony. Thank you very much. A great conversation. I look forward to chatting again.
Thanks very much.